if you have some amount of knowledge that the average person doesn't know, then you can be a podcast guest. You don't necessarily have to be an author or have some new theory or information in your field. You just have to know more than the listener and be able to provide value to them.
And welcome to the Business Growth Architect Show. This is your host, Beate Gillette, the Growth Architect. In this show, you will learn how to grow your authority and scale your impact using strategies brought to you by the most amazing and well-known, respected experts, coaches, consultants all over the world. We are a global ranked top 10% podcast, and we can't wait to share these insights with you. Welcome, everybody. This is Beate Gillette, your host of the Business Growth Architect Show. And today with me is Spencer Carpenter. And Spencer comes to us from Outlier Audio, and it is all about how to grow your authority with podcasting and landing gigs on podcasts. Spencer, I'm so excited for you to be here today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to provide your listeners with some value.
I love it. So let's dive right in. What is Outlier Audio and what do you do?
Sure. So Outlier Audio is a full-service podcast booking agency that helps talented entrepreneurs, business professionals, and investors get booked on podcasts. The way I came about this was I was in the music industry for 15 years, and I was always working on either side of talent representation as a concert promoter, as a tour booking agent, as an artist manager, and things like that. And then I got a little bit older and started finding podcasts. I realized that there were a lot of people with really great information, and their title was just their job. I realized that unless you are Mark Cuban or Richard Branson, entrepreneurs are not considered talent. Their skill set is just their job. And that seemed really silly to me. So when COVID then shut down the entire music industry, I decided to pivot and I'd start helping talented entrepreneurs and business professionals get booked on podcasts so they could perform while they were stuck in quarantine. So that's kind of how we got here is, I just realized there's a lot of people with really valuable information out there, and they should be treated as more than just their job title.
So what I like about this, and I want to point this out for our listeners, is that was a hard pivot for you. So talk to us maybe a little bit, because we talk so much about strategy here. Was this a painful strategy? Was this that the sky opened and the angels came and sang, ah? Like, what was the strategy shift? Because that cannot have been easy.
Yeah, prior to making this decision, I had gone from I had been successfully unemployed for about 4 years. And what I mean by that is I always had a constant flow of inconsistent income. So I always had gigs coming up and I was able to make a living that way. And I liked it because I had the freedom. But the reason I was able to do that is because after spending 15 years in the music industry, I kind of zoomed out and realized that my skill sets aren't tied to a specific title within a specific industry. So while I was a festival organizer and concert promoter, you remove that from the music industry and made me a logistics expert. And so I was able to use that to get a gig planning a blockchain conference. I was also able to use that to in much less important roles, but being good at logistics is helpful in a lot of areas. And so my pivot really came from being able to zoom out and see, I can apply my skills to different areas. You just kind of have to learn some of the nuance and maybe some of the terminology and specific incidences that happen in various industries. But when you do that, it's really easy to pivot. And so to your point about whether or not it was difficult or the skies kind of opened up, I'm not someone that jumps into something without firm confidence I can do it. Whether or not that means I'm an expert in it is a different question. But whether or not I'm confident, I realized as soon as this idea came to me, I was immediately like, oh, I'm doing this. This is so easy to me. It's outreach and it's representation. Two things I've always been really good at. And I just decided to apply it to a different area where a lot of people aren't getting that attention.
Do you think that there's a teaching point in here to say that even though in your career you were in a different industry, music, but that all the skills that you had acquired or learned in this period of time, they're all useful, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it comes back to, I looked at, especially as it relates to entrepreneurs and business professionals, when I was coming up with this idea, I looked to see if there were other people doing it. And there are a handful of companies that do podcast booking services. But what I realized from looking at them is that they are mostly following an old PR model where they want an author or a keynote speaker they can put on retainer. And when I looked at their staff, what it seemed to me was they were a lot of people that maybe got a job in public relations or communications and wanted a remote job out of college. And so they just kind of found this remote job. Whereas, do I actually know if there's a difference between talent representation and being a publicity agent? I can't really say, but what I do know is that as an entrepreneur myself, that gave me a lens to work through than someone that's different than someone that just came out of college and is just working with entrepreneurs. I started booking concerts when I was 15. When I was in music, the reason I had multiple different roles is because I worked for one company that had several brands, and none of which had enough work to keep me occupied just itself. So I ran 6 different businesses under this one umbrella and learned a lot of different skills from that. I also have a photo booth rental business. I had a merchandise printing business. So not that I'm this super successful serial entrepreneur in my 20s. These were all small businesses that, again, helped me just make an income. But I've always been super interested in learning how other people make money. I look at those ice boxes that sit outside of 7-Eleven. Someone out there is bragging that they are the number one ice chest producer in the US. It is the least sexiest thing you could say, but that person's a multimillionaire, I'm sure. And things like that have always fascinated me, the different ways people make money. And so I knew that bringing that to this area of podcasting and looking at business professionals and entrepreneurs as talent was going to allow me to see things sometimes that they don't see themselves. There are a lot of people that come to me and say, what's my angle for branding? And I usually don't know until I poke at them a little bit. I'm like, tell me a little bit about you. Like, how did you get here? And that's how, for example, I work with a lot of financial planners. A lot of them are confined legally to what they can do for their clients, which means a lot of them do the exact same thing. But I have one in particular that she focuses on mom and pop businesses and helping them get ready to sell their business. And the reason she does that is because she is a first-generation immigrant. Her parents came here, had a import-export business, and then her dad got diagnosed with some terminal illness that left her mom having to care for him for the last 8 years of his life. Because their business was not ready to sell and could not be run without them, they lost everything. And so now, even though she has a job that is very similar to many other people in her industry, she knows the pain points of that niche of person. And so being able to niche down like that is really important in being able to apply skills from past industries to maybe what your future endeavor is. And that, using that type of lens really helps with that pivot and being able to realize where can you help people that are being underrepresented.
You made a lot of really excellent points. So there's a couple of things I want to ask you. So number one, expert, authority, celebrity. Are you making any differentiation factors there in how you explain this to your clients? Because on my end, people mistake influence and celebrity with authority. Where are you coming from on that?
I think that I actually think to be on a podcast, you don't necessarily need to be the most sought after thought leader in your industry at all. It's obviously helpful. And using podcasts as a way to become an authority and gain reputation is especially great when within your network, being able to share that you were invited onto a podcast and then being able to do that week after week or month after month really lets people know whether they just found you or they've been following you for a while. It really lets them know that things are happening for you and that you're someone that is being looked to for guidance. But one of the things I actually like to explain to people is if you have some amount of knowledge that the average person doesn't know, then you can be a podcast guest. You don't necessarily have to be an author or have some new theory or information in your field. You just have to know more than the listener. and be able to provide value to them. And so again, going back to someone like a financial planner, everyone knows that financial planners get paid well for what they do. Just not everyone is ready to hire one. But if you're willing to give the information for free in a podcast interview, everyone's willing to listen. And so having any type of information like that is always going to be helpful in pitching yourself to a podcast. So where can you stand out from what knowledge the listener already might have or the host might have? And how can you present that knowledge to them in a way that's useful and helpful to them?
I really like what you said is that in authority building, or growth authority, how we refer to it, a lot of it is that people look at the Grant Cardones and the big internet marketing faces and Gary Vee, and they go, that's the status. That's really unrealistic for 99.99% of people, because we are talking heads who are subject matter experts that talk about something that, may or may not be really as interesting to it. I mean, Gary Vee has a machine. He's got 20 full-time people and a huge remote team all over the world that does nothing other than throw content out 24/7 for him at the cost of millions and millions and millions of dollars. I mean, that's a lifestyle that for an authority, if you want that, but that's not what we're talking about. I want to be very clear about your strategy is to take, let's say, for the lack of a better word, and I mean this in the most loving way possible, ordinary people that have a business, that have an idea, that are looking to market themselves. They're looking to get their message out. So now take us through this. So now I come to you and I say, Spencer, what should I talk about? How do I use a podcast to build my authority? So how do you help them do that?
Yeah, so it is off the bat just helping them develop what that pitch and what that angle of attack is. What is the value proposition that you can bring to a host or an audience? And so, I really like to help people develop at least 2 to 3 of those, ideally 4 to 5. But what you can't do is go to a podcast host and say, I can speak about entrepreneurship. I can speak about marketing. Like if you're pitching an entrepreneur show, yeah, everybody can talk about entrepreneurship, but what is it you are bringing that's unique, whether that be your story or your angle or your knowledge? And it's sometimes a combination. I have a real estate guy that was kind of new when I started working with him. He had only been in the industry full time for about a year, and he had just quit his job when COVID hit. So he kind of had to make it work. And at one point he was a wholesaler, which means he sells properties to other people for a fee. And so at one point he was on vacation and he had $100,000 in wholesale fees come in. And so we were able to use the topic of how to make $100,000 while on vacation. It wasn't because he had some unique strategy. He just hired 3 well-trained employees. He chose the right people and systematized it. Now, lots of business and entrepreneurship shows love to be able to talk about systems because it's always needed for growth. But how to force it without it being an unnecessary conversation, or just this week we're going to talk about systems, like being able to present them with a case study that allowed people to understand why you need to develop your systems if you haven't, is what got him booked on shows. He didn't have this massive real estate portfolio to point to at the time I started working with him. He only had his skills and his lens as a way to push it all forward. And so that's the type of thing that I help people do when they get started on this podcast. Like some of them might already know exactly what they can bring up that is going to be unique, what they can provide that the rest of the industry isn't talking to. If let's just say you're a specific type of CPA, then you're already going to have nuanced information that a more ordinary CPA or general CPA wouldn't have. So like off the bat, people can look to their specialized area as what can drive the conversation. But looking beyond that, it's like what perspective do you have, or unique value proposition to give to, again, the host or the listener? Like what can you throw in? And there are some times where it's the story. Again, going back to that financial planner, we're not going to sell anybody on like her investing in index funds. It's her story and knowing the troubles that these people face. That is what's going to get the conversation booked and the value she's going to be able to provide, because she's going to be able to say, here are the things I know that you're not looking out for
because it hasn't been on your mind. I love that. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I get a pitch, oftentimes from, people who do similar things than you do. And it says, here's John Smith. Here's John Smith's one sheet. It's all about John. And here's John and more about John. And John is so great. And John is so amazing. And John can speak about. And then they give me a list of 50 things. And then they say, well, the minute you've decided what you want to speak to John about, call us, and then we'll be happy to provide them for you. And I'm going like, are you insane? Do I look like I have time to do the work for you? When you come on this is a show about strategy and business models. So you think that I want to talk about your story on when your dad gave you the first camera and that inspired you to do X? Forgive me, I don't care, but this is about what do we give to our audience that's relevant for them? And so if you can't even do that, you end up in the trash because I don't have time for that. Go ahead.
Well, and that's I try to make my pitches as plug and play as possible. And so for that reason, to your point, you know what, if they had already sold you on John, then maybe getting to the part about when his dad gave him the first camera was actually something you'd be interested in. However, if you lead with that, it's boring. So my first sentence in every pitch is like, I'm reaching out about so-and-so being on show to discuss. And then I lead with the 2 or 3 strongest topics. At that point, it doesn't matter how long the rest of the pitch is. They're going to read it or they're just going to say, go for it. But there are people that send me their bio when I'm developing their pitch and says, proud father of 3 and loves to volunteer, with his son's Little League team. I cut it out immediately. It's not helpful in getting the podcast pitch. Maybe if you're an ultra marathoner, there's something to be said about including that. But like your joys and that your hobbies are typically not going to be what gets you the interview. You need to lead. You need to catch their attention with the value you're going to bring. And then you can go into maybe some more of not to downplay any, like everybody's life is unique and special, but talking about is sometimes just fluff in a pitch. It just makes it longer for no reason. And you want every word that is in your pitch to have a purpose, because otherwise you're just creating this long, almost like daunting thing for the reader. Even though they can skim it in 30 seconds and know whether or not it's good, it seems like a task. And to your point, it's giving you work to do. That's why I don't lead with 50 topics. Here are 5. You can pick one of them or you can pick all 5 of them. Either way, it's going to take up 25 to 45 minutes to, between some combination of them. Or we can speak about whatever you want. I also let them know that.
I love that. We'll talk more about how to nail your pitch in just a minute, right after this message. Thank you so much for listening to or watching the show. This is Beate Gillette. I am asking you to please help us spread the word of the show, and here's how you can do this. Go ahead and share this episode with one other person that needs to hear what we were talking about today. Of course, a 5-star review and a subscription is always appreciated, and that's what's helped us to become a top 10% globally ranked show by Listen Notes. Here is how we can help you. There is opportunity in every market, and especially in this market. And we want to help you to figure out what that is. As our thank you for you being here, we would like to gift you with a complimentary uncovery session with one of our business growth advisors. All you have to do is go to uncoverysession.com, and one of our advisors will take you through our process to help you figure out how you can grow your business right now. And now, back to the show. Beate Gillette here with Spencer Carpenter from Outlier Audio. And Spencer, we were just talking about kind of like the do's and don't do's of the pitch. I love that you said we need to make sure that we make it as easy as possible for the podcast host. So now I come to you. Now I say I'm an expert in my industry. I'm not really entirely sure on whether or not I have enough to say that is relevant. So you're going to help me with identifying my message so that because that's what you do. You pull out the pieces that are really relevant for other people. And I loved what you said about you have to just know more than most people or other people, because that's really the key. I always think that the knowledge vomit, I call it lovingly the knowledge vomit, right? When you want to take everything that you've learned in like 20, 30 years and just vomit it on the poor audience all at once. It's just overwhelming. So it's small pieces. So why do I want to be on a podcast? What does this do for my business?
Oh, man.
Let's drive it home.
Where to start? Off the bat, just because I know I'm sure all of your listeners are experienced with some of the more basic things. Amazing SEO. You were just talking about the pitch of John Smith, where the either John or the representative just writes all these amazing things about John. To the listeners, your individual website, your LinkedIn, your Instagram, your Facebook, all of that is the exact same thing. It's all things you wrote about yourself. And a podcast, let's just say you've been on 5 podcasts. Each one is going to be titled differently. It might include your same bio, but each conversation is going to be unique. So it's not just all the things you wrote about yourself. It's showing that a host wanted you on, liked the conversation, released it, and here's each individual conversation. And in search results, it's fantastic. So that's just surface level. Also, you get content you can repurpose. Some people spend a lot of money to have a production team come in and film them and make all this content. It comes out inorganic and insincere because they were put in front of the microphone and the camera, and it's very odd. Whereas podcasts are these very organic conversations where you can repurpose that content and it feels very real. So those are 2 of the things that are obviously off the bat fantastic. But the thing that I really like about podcasts and why people should be on it is because of what I call the no pitch scenario. And I don't know about you, I hate being sold. Some people don't mind it, but if I even sign up for some sort of consultation call, I'm still not comfortable with it going into it. And it's just because I know someone is trying to take money out of my pocket and into theirs. Even if it's a justified service or reason, I just don't like feeling like I'm sold. And that's what a lot of like ads and content is. It's people putting out 30 to 60-second pieces of content, a disruptive marketing platform such as Instagram or Facebook. So you have to grab someone's attention. You have to keep their attention. You have to get them to your website. You have to convert them or get them to schedule a call. And it's a bunch of steps, all while they know that they're being sold. Podcasts, again, are an organic conversation. And even more than that, the listener is volunteering to come listen. It's not them being persuaded or feeling like they are being coerced. They trust the host and they like listening to the podcast. So off the bat, you get to use the host platform that they built in their audience. But beyond that, it's that they chose to listen. And it wasn't choosing to listen for 30 to 60 seconds like that piece of content. It's for 25 or 35 or 45 to 60 minutes typically. And that whole time is just building rapport and trust. It's not you selling them and them trying to decide whether or not they trust you. It's just the conversation where they get to hear your background, they get to hear your personality, your knowledge, they get to hear joking back and forth with the host sometimes. And all that while they're getting to know the person, that's giving the interview. And, the biggest example I have from that personally was the first time I met a podcast host that I had listened to was several years ago, and I'd been listening to him about a year, and he happened to be in Philadelphia, and I said, "Hey, let's go get dinner." And he responded, and we did. And I was giving him an update on my life as if he knew me, forgetting that he didn't, because I knew him so well. I knew the things he invested in. I knew about past relationships. I knew about, a tragedy within his family. I knew all these things about him. And I kind of forgot that he didn't know anything about me. And it's because of that trust building and rapport building that had happened. I just forgot and went into this mode of we've been friends for years. And so when you're able to speak, to someone that's willing to listen and volunteering to listen for 45 minutes or so, that just opens up this real acceptance of what you have to say. And allows that trust to be built. And then let's say they reach out. While it's a cold lead to you, it's a really hot lead to that. It's actually a really hot lead. At that point, they want to know more about your service. So they just want to know the pricing. They're already sold on you if they decide to reach out from a podcast. It's just a matter of whether or not they can make it work or if it works with their budget or something.
I think you said a lot of very important things, and I want to just spend a little bit more time on that and laying this out. The notion to say that everybody has a sales resistance, you are absolutely right. The minute somebody calls is, "Hi, my name is," and "How are you?" You already go like, "Okay, here we go."
Yeah.
Let's just hope it's not a roofer, HVAC, or whatever it is. So we have, because we are trained to go look on the internet for information, we can do sales and we can buy stuff and verify validity, credibility of people on our own. So because everybody has access to these tools, they're being used to sell you all the time. To your point, on the Instagram feed, when I go through my feed, it's just talking heads. 3 things 5 ways to have you, the one thing, and it just goes on, and you scroll. And then there's the cat with the goggles skiing. And then now I spend 5 minutes watching this cool cat, completely fearless with its own like warm suit and down jacket, in the backpack of the skier going skiing. And now I'm going, it's almost like I'm able to take a breath of relief from being sold. But when I'm in a conversation, I am not participating actively in the conversations, like I'm listening into 2 people talking. So there is no resistance whatsoever, because in my car, I can turn it off anytime I want to. I'm walking, I can stop that episode, listen to another episode. So the buyer, the consumer, the listener is completely in charge. And that makes it so unbelievably valuable that when they choose to give you their time, that's the gold. Am I right with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
All right. So now, somebody who says, "Spencer, I think I'm ready." What do you do for them, and where would we send them? What can you help our audience with?
Yeah. So, again, it's really helping get that pitch together and helping work out the angle. But even further, I do the outreach. I do the scheduling. I work with my clients or their assistant to get it on their schedule. And a lot of my work is on the front end. It's then, managing their podcast schedule for the next several months to make sure they don't forget, to make sure that the headshots are in, to make sure that any additional forms that need to be filled out. There are a lot of shows with additional information, or they want it submitted in their format. I handle all of that. But even further, it's helping develop what are the right shows to submit my clients to. There's, because podcasting has such a low barrier of entry, there are lots of shows being developed all the time, and they can be very valuable shows. But I always like to go for something that's a little more established, a host that has a little more experience. It's clear that they've been around long enough that they've already built up a little bit of a platform. That way my clients are getting front of their platform. So that's what I help a lot of people with. And, some people, it's not the right time for them to have full outreach. They can sign up on a platform like Podmatch and, develop their own, one sheet online and just connect with some hosts right there. But if it's a service, if it's something that's going to be time consuming for you, or you just don't have the know-how, or quite frankly, the motivation to do it yourself, that's when people come to someone like me. And so, most people just reach out to me on my Instagram or my website, and I'm always pretty honest about whether or not I think that, we have a viable option here. But just about everybody can be on a podcast,
Yeah, and I want to mention this because I'm really always interested in business models and how you do it, and so I want to just mention that. So you are very clear about this. You have a five submission package where it's just 5 shows. So it's not like, because we did talk about sales, so people come to you, don't sign their life away for the next year, plus their dog, so you can look before you leap, and you can try out 5 podcasts and see which is, one of the reasons I wanted you on the show. I think that's really important for people listening to say, I want to try it, but I haven't decided. just reach out to Spencer, see if a five show program is right for you, so you get the hang of it and you see what that's like. Because in our world, as authority builders, because we work strategy, systems, and authority building, podcasting, being a podcast host and a podcast guest, are two of my big lead generation drivers, and really have been significant in how we develop partnerships, opportunities, finding additional clients, and building this up. So I cannot emphasize how important it is, if you're an expert in your industry, to really listen, possibly again to this and say, even if you do one a month, right? Even if you get out just a little bit before you build this into your actual strategy, you do want to know how this works, so that when you're ready to pull the trigger, that you know what to do and where to go. Spencer, how can we find out where you are? So you already said Instagram, so just give us all the URLs and handles so people can find you, please.
Yeah, our website is outlieraudio.com, outlieraudio.com. My Instagram, where I'm the most active, is just my name, at Spencer Carpenter. And the business Instagram is at Outlier Audio, where you can just see a sample of like all the people we work with, the shows we've gotten them on, and that sort of thing. And yeah, like you mentioned, this is not, I'm not getting people locked down for year-long commitments or anything like that. Just try 5 podcasts. See if you like it. See if you like working with me. See if you like what came out of it. And hey, at the end, let's just say, you decide you don't want to do more. You had 5 one-on-one conversations with people in your industry. And now you have all of the content you need to repurpose that for a long time if you want. Just 5 or 10 podcasts, and then working with someone like you really gets them a ton of content that they can repurpose for years if they want. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Spencer. It's been amazing. I loved having you on the show. And for all of you listening, shall I drive the point home one more time? Podcasting is a very important way to get your name out, to find clients, to build trust. It is one of the things, of all the things out there, that really works right now. So you must pay attention to this. And with that ever so subtle message, I'll say goodbye to you for today. And thank you so much for listening and watching. Thank you for listening to or watching this episode. We are so grateful that you are here. That's what is our passion. That's what lights us up. We are here to share strategies because that's what we're super excited about. Let us help you find the right strategy in this market, the strategy, the opportunity that will help you to grow your authority and scale your impact. Simply go to uncoveriesession.com and get your session on the books with one of our business growth advisors so that you can get very clear what your very next step should be to grow your business. Please subscribe to the show now so that you'll never miss another episode. Episodes are dropping every Monday. Again, this is Beate Schlett, the Growth Architect, and I thank you so much for being here, and goodbye.